Good day. Welcome to the Cory Morgan Show. Yeah, we got another good one ahead. Lots going on. Summer things haven't really slowed down politically that much. Often it gets a little hard to find things to cover, but there's been no shortage of stuff to go on about these days. The show is live. Be sure to use that comment scroll, guys. Send those questions my way, comments, ideas. I see Jordan Luntz saying tall poppy syndrome. Yeah, that leads into what I'm going to talk about in a bit, and it's a good analogy for what I'm talking about. Sean Wright talking about a referendum shouldn't even happen. We're going to talk a little bit about that as well, because Canada's collapse will bring about Alberta's independence. That's another way to look at it. It might come that way. Who knows? Going to have Jonathan Dennis come on. He was a former Justice Minister of Alberta. We're going to talk a little bit about the tail end of the progressive conservative government back in the past, and now the current UCP, and sort of the resurgence of some of the worst of the progressive conservatives as Fabio Thomas Lukasic keeps popping up in the news scroll still, whether we want to hear from him or not. All right, but get on what I'm going to rant about here in a bit here. It's on the news, of course. Just the announcements are always the same, it seems, out of Prime Minister Carney. He's now tossing, $1 billion and some dollars at the BC forestry sector. And I know they're hurting. I know the trade mess is causing pressures. But Carney's answer to everything is just tossing more money at it. And guys, this doesn't bode well for us. I mean, Alberta's doing well despite Canada, not because of it. And so Saskatchewan's doing pretty good too. Alberta's surpassing the rest of the country in most economic measures. Even though oil prices have been tumultuous, Alberta's economy is going strong. Unemployment's below the national average. Our provincial government posted a surplus of over $8 billion. And new housing units even created will reach a record high of nearly 60,000 this year. Having a low tax rate and a welcoming business environment has diversified the local economy, and it's paying off. Now, by comparison, Canada's economic outlook is a basket case. Under Carney's brilliant guidance, the deficit went from $62 billion from when he was elected to a staggering $92 billion and growing. Carney's spending spree is making his predecessor, Justin Trudeau, look like a cheapskate. We're just paying the interest on the current national debt costs as much as the government brings in every year on the GST. That's as much as the federal government sends out in annual health care transfers to the provinces. It gets worse, though. Carney's fiscal irresponsibility is sure to lead to a credit downgrade for the federal government soon. And that means interest rates will rise on the federal debt as the balance grows by nearly $100 billion a year. Look, Canada's swirling into a debt catastrophe, and Carney's showing no indication of trying to stop it. Carney was sold to Canadians in the last election as some sort of economic and diplomatic wizard. Well, so far his economic ineptitude is only being overshadowed by his utter failure to get a deal with Canada's largest trading partner done. And now rising tariffs are devastating some Canadian industries. The elbows up approach has been a total failure. Not to be outdone by the federal government, though, Doug Ford's bumbling management of Ontario has put the province into have-not status, and they rely on equalization payments to pay their bills. Ford jumped into bed with Justin Trudeau on subsidy sinkholes such as battery plants that never began construction and edible cricket factories that went broke. The unemployment rate in Ontario is nearly 8%, while the cost of living continues to rise. Despite having 3 times Alberta's population, Ontario only managed to build the same number of housing units in 1 year. Too much government has made increasing housing at a sustainable rate impossible. Mass immigration, though, it continues to pressure the country while billions are spent to house refugees in hotels. The influx has contributed to a near collapse of healthcare systems in every province. And despite constant spending increases, it's just not getting better. And of course, then there's the Maritimes. They remain in perpetual state of dependency, while unemployment in Newfoundland sits at 10% with no relief on the horizon. Canada prefers to subsidize people to stay in the regions without resources rather than move the people to the regions that need the labor. Then they bring in more mass immigration to fill the labor needs in other areas. It's a recipe for national population imbalance. And then, of course, let's look at Quebec. Well, Quebec's in it for Quebec. They control the national agenda and keeping terrible policies with everything from supply management to impose bilingualism upon the West. And they'll happily hinder Western economic development while sucking in billions in equalization payments and other bribes. Manitoba and BC, they both elected socialist governments which are opposing pipeline development and stunting their own economies. BC is likely going to join the majority of Canada as a have-not province and begin collecting welfare through equalization soon too. That just leaves Alberta and Saskatchewan to pay the nation's bills, guys. Rest assured, being the national sugar daddies won't earn the prairie province's gratitude or respect. Alberta and Saskatchewan will get nothing but contempt and ire from the Canadian power brokers. Rather than emulate Alberta's success, they'll strive to tear the provinces down, prairie provinces, to their economic level and social failure. Canada's Laurentian leader driven by ideology and entitlement. They'd rather sink the nation than admit their ideology is one of failure. Alberta and Saskatchewan's success has painted a target on their backs. The Liberals have nothing to lose in enraging prairie voters, and they see the accumulating wealth of the West as a plum to be harvested for the East, rather than an asset earned by Westerners, which must be kept by Westerners. Premiers Moe and Smith both recognize this threat. That's why legislation like the Sovereignty Act was created. And while the provincial governments aren't overtly supporting independence, they aren't hindering independence movements from growing and pursuing a referendum either. The West has to prepare for another economic assault from the Eastern Canada. It's going to happen. It'll be the last gasp of a central government going broke. Alberta and Saskatchewan can't save Canada. We can save ourselves, though, through pursuing independence rather than letting misguided federalists pull us into economic insolvency with the rest of the nation. So watch it, guys. Strap in. It's coming. They're going broke, and we're sitting with a full wallet. You know they can't leave it that way for much longer. All right, let's see what else is going on out there with News Editor Dave. How's it going?
Yeah, I wish I had a full wallet.
Well, the province is a full wallet. Well, yeah, we're an independent media. Our
I was going to say, it doesn't do me any good whatsoever. So I'm hearing that Duke the Wonder Dog acted heroically earlier this week.
He got up in the middle of the night and shook the windows and barked at the dog door because he sensed a bear outside, yes.
So, yeah, you had a black bear strolling on your cam heading for the honey.
He was heading that way, but the hives were intact in the morning. So
because of the heroic actions of Duke the Wonder Dog.
I'm sure Duke believes that. And,
don't tell him otherwise.
Yeah, I think the electric fence might have more to do with it, but we'll see. But yes, Duke did get up and bark his brains out, and our other dog, Volstagg, went tearing out into the hill, hoping to get himself killed, but the bear didn't bother with
There you go. How do you have this area protected? Do you say electric fences?
It's an old chicken coop, and it's got a wire around that, and then I've got an electric fence around that, and then I got a motion detector spotlight, and I got a Halloween decoration that makes a screaming noise whenever something comes near it. And it's worked so far for the last few years, because, yeah, my first year at attempted beekeeping went great until a bear came in and completely devastated my
house. Well, so it stays that way because you're having a great year with that.
We got a load of it. Man, it had to be 150 pounds in the last harvest or something like that, 100 pounds maybe, and just about as much more to come.
Nice. Good for you.
Yeah, the rain's not good for
now much. You got to find a new hobby.
I'll find something.
The news, you talked about immigration. Did you know that since Mark Carney became prime minister, the Liberals have refused to release immigration numbers? It used to come out once a month, but it has stopped since March. So Calgary Nose Hill MP Michelle Rempel-Garner got up on the soapbox today and demanded they restart it. But I don't think there's much chance of the Liberals telling us how many people are coming in, do you?
So they just don't want to admit that the mass immigration is continuing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. You don't want to be in Nova Scotia this summer. They banned walking in the woods. The fire danger is extreme up there. So the Premier Houston this morning banned people from going on walks in woods.
Well, since we really have a very flimsy charter of rights, things like mobility and so on don't even come into play. If the Premier, frivolously wants to ban people from going on public land, what can you do? Yeah,
exactly. And it includes things like, the dirt bikes and the quads and all that sort of stuff. So,
yeah. Well, we get that occasionally here. When it gets really hot and dry, they stop the ATVs and so on. But
they never stop people.
No, and I know some people will say, "Oh, but some idiot will go out there and flick a cigarette." But the idiot who's going to flick a cigarette and dye grass isn't going to be smart enough to stop going in the woods if Premier Houston told him not to.
Exactly. So, not a summer of no fun shaking up in Nova Scotia. Our summer is no fun because of rain. Yeah, and it won't stop every day.
And as I said, it's good for the bees, but otherwise, there's something else at my place. It's like a jungle when you go outside my fences. Boy, there's no fire risk back there, even if I wanted to burn.
Exactly. Yet again, another active shooter in the United States, this time at a military base, Cory. This morning in Georgia, Fort Stewart, 5 soldiers shot, transported to hospital. And really, that's only the details we know at the moment. Suspect is in custody, but I'll be updating that story throughout the afternoon. So here's my favorite story of the day. Seattle Kraken, NHL hockey team. They've got a furry mascot called Boy. Like Boy, as in Bowie. Yeah, that might be the better way to pronounce it. So every year they do a thing with an Alaska hockey school, try and keep interest in Alaska and hockey. So they decided the thing to do would be to go to the epicenter of grizzly bears in the entire world, Brook Falls, where hundreds of bears sit and wait for salmon, and put this stuffed animal mascot in the middle of the river fly fishing with a player, Seattle Kraken player. And then, of course, you see the grizzly approaching in the pathway, and his eyes light up.
It's like exotic food.
Exotic food, sushi or something nice and fluffy out there. So, of course, the bear charges into the water, and the poor buoy and the hockey player. And I mean, I'll give them credit. They didn't scream like little girls like I would have done.
I would have too. It would have been a code brown.
Yeah, exactly. But, the bear sort of went towards them, charged towards them, and then kind of veered off at the very end. So I think they're very lucky. Very lucky. But there's some great video on the website, and you can go check that out. So, but that's the story of the day. Our editorial we can talk about is praising American Eagle for standing by the lovely Sydney Sweeney and not collapsing in the face of all that incredible woke outrage. And incredible it was. It was crazy.
It's ridiculous. I mean, they've been moving towards a celebration of ugly. It kind of comes more towards one of my commenters talking about the tall poppy syndrome. There's just certain people who just feel, we got to tear everybody down. Okay, we didn't all get the good genes of Sweeney, but you can still put them out and advertise and appreciate them for crying out loud.
Exactly. It's just stupid. There was a 16-year-old murdered in Calgary last week. Cory, we've got an update on that coming up shortly, including a family statement. And I got to give you a plug. Got to give my friend Cory Morgan a plug. He makes the second best honey in Alberta, admittedly. And he will be at the Longview Craft Market this weekend.
It was a farmer's market.
Farmer's market in Longview.
Saturday,
and he will have his honey for sale there. Hundreds of pounds that he's already harvested. Best honey, well, in my opinion, but I haven't tasted the other guys. But go ahead and buy Cory's honey.
Well, I appreciate the plug, and I still think it was a flaw in the judging on the last one. But either way, there's been no complaints about the honey, so thanks for that. Yeah,
exactly.
Jane will be there all day too with her
barn quilt. So good. Well, hopefully a successful day, and the rain stays away.
Yeah, let's go.
There you go.
Well, thanks, Dave. And I guess it's going to be a couple of weeks before we see you in here.
Yeah, I'm taking some time off, grandson time. My first grandson out in Vancouver, and I've got some relatives flying in from England, so should be a great 2 weeks for me.
Right on. Well, enjoy the break, and
see you when I get back.
When you get back.
You bet.
All right. That is our news editor, Dave Naylor, busy and getting his stuff done before he can escape to the coast and enjoy his grandson as he should. I just want to like to remind you guys, the reason us independent media guys, as much as our wallets aren't that fat, we're getting by. And it's thanks to you guys who have subscribed. We don't take tax dollars. We won't take them, but we rely on subscribers. And I know most of you watching have already subscribed, and we really appreciate it. It's $10 a month, $100 for a year. But if you haven't subscribed, check it out, guys. I mean, come on. $10 a month helps keep us rolling, keeps things moving, and beats the legacy media outlets who are sucking the money out of your wallet anyway through tax dollars. So get on their westernstandard.news/subscription, take one out, and help support all of this independent journalism out there. You can see the other Dave behind me there. He's not eating Shanghai noodles today as the other was the other day, but he will be joining me for news updates while Dave Naylor is on vacation. So we'll have fun with him when that show gets rolling. I won't allow him to bring his lunch in with him. All right, I see Jonathan already in the lobby. Maybe I'll pull him in. I've been looking forward to this. This is Jonathan Dennis, former cabinet minister. He was the Justice Minister, Solicitor General, Attorney General, so many titles they give to that thing, but back with the Redford government in the past, and now runs Guardian Law. How you doing, Jonathan?
I'm better now that I'm on your show, Cory. How are you doing?
Good. No, I really appreciate you coming on today. You've got a voice that you can really add to this, because I think we're still in a transitional place in politics in a way. I mean, you were kind of on the tail end of an incredible dynasty, I guess, of progressive conservatives. We went through the turning point of putting the NDP in for a while, and then the UCP is back in. They've changed a leader. It's like they're still trying to find their footing. So where to begin? I mean, towards the end of the progressive conservatives, there was kind of some problems going on within. Every party has that. And one of the people who's been coming up, we've been hearing in the news again, for example, is Thomas Lukaszuk. You served in cabinet with him. Did he indicate, I guess, some of the divided people within the past progressive conservatives?
Well, so I'll tell you, oddly enough, he and I were appointed to cabinet the same day. It was January 15, 2010. Never forget that day. And I remember my uncle Jerome showing up and saying that he had taught him at St. Joseph's High School up in Edmonton. So Thomas was elected in 2001. I came in 2008. If there's one thing I really got to give him credit for, though, he put a lot of work into Ukraine relief. Him and Ed Stelmach put together like a whole plane of relief items to Ukraine. So good on him for that. Like, I don't care what side of the spectrum you're on. When you're doing charity work like that, kudos, man. That's great. Now, some of the problems that the PC party had towards the end is it was the only game in town for literally 44 years. Peter Lougheed came to power in 1971. We were out in 2015. That's the second longest streak of any government in Canadian history. So it's not insignificant. The problem towards the end, and Ted Morton had talked about this, he was there a term before me. He had noticed that the PC party was starting to try to establish a different base. And so what ended up happening is, in doing that, we alienated a lot of our traditional supporters. And I'll be honest, I really did not find a lot in common with Mr. Lukaszuk when I was in office. He has some different views, and the fact that he has actually openly supported the NDP in the last two provincial elections, has been openly working with Trudeau the last couple of federal elections, that doesn't really seem that conservative to me.
No, and that's what I was kind of wanted to get at was I guess some people would say, well, that's a good sign. It was diversity in the governing party. You had some people of very different ideologies within the same government, but realistically, that's kind of what led to the instability, probably, which led to the end of things later. You've remained, quite consistently conservative-minded ever since, even after leaving government. Mr. Lukaszuk, as you said, is now leaning more towards the NDP and the Liberals. Now, we got a different outlook going on. There's a two-party system sort of happening. Mr. Lukaszuk really is becoming a public person. Do you think he might be, though, looking at pursuing a political role again?
Well, again, only he could answer that question. But I'll just say this, is that either he's quite good at drawing attention to himself. I'll give him that as well. But the question is one of my neighbors got an email from his Forever Canada campaign. And I'm starting to think, this is a really good way to amass a lot of data, names, addresses, emails, and also somebody's voter intention. Like, what are your biggest issues? It's a really, really good way to amass a lot of data, potentially tens, even hundreds of thousands of potential names. So my question is this, is he just looking for attention, or is there something else afoot here? Because I really, really get the feeling, even anecdotally, that Nenshi is not catching on as the NDP leader. So is he looking to succeed him? I don't know. Is he looking to, the Alberta party is going to have a couple more MLAs here. Is he looking to go there? I don't know the answer to that question, but it is interesting.
Yeah, well, and I want to bring that up too, actually. Yeah, with Peter Guthrie, and he was talking about kind of bringing the Progressive Conservative name back, but it turns out he can't legally do that. So now he's looking at the Alberta party, whether or not they'll go anywhere with that or not. I mean, time will tell. But it's one of those indications, again, of a Conservative party that Premier Smith has got to worry about trying to maintain some degree of unity, or she could, get into some devastating splits before the next election.
Well, that's absolutely true. But to go back to an earlier point as well, I do believe it's important to build coalitions. I also think that it's important to let past fights go. You and I have been on some opposite sides in the past. I think you're a great guy. You can have friends across the aisle. But the caveat to that is you cannot get too broad to the point where you tolerate everything and stand for nothing. There isn't a point where a party has to ask itself, what are our core values? What makes us conservative? And there's economic conservatives, social conservatives, environmental conservatives. There's a lot of common ground there, but it just can't get too broad.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you were just in such a diverse cabinet. How well, I mean, with a leader trying to hold that together, when you get somebody on such a, they were trying to be everything to everybody, I think is kind of what led to the end to a degree with the PCs. People knew as well, if you wanted to get into a government seat, you had to join the PCs back then. So even if you're
the only gig in town,
if your ideology was more left-leaning, NDP-ish, and there were a number of people with the PCs that way, well, they pursued that route. But there must have been some pretty scorching battles in there occasionally then between some of the individuals. I don't expect you to breach confidentialities, but that makes it a challenge for a leader.
The confidentiality continues after the fact, so I'm not going to get thank you for that out. But I do remember one time, Mr. Lukaszuk really didn't like being challenged in caucus. I remember an altercation, not a physical one, that he and I had at Government House after the fact. reality, though, is I would just I like us to ask as a movement, what are our core values? What makes a person an environmental conservative, a social conservative, a fiscal conservative like myself? What defines us as a movement? There's certain non-negotiables that a person must have, or that a party really should have. What makes us the party that we're at? And you start straying too far from that, what ends up happening is you alienate your traditional supporters. And I think maybe you were in that category. You felt alienated at that time. One of the biggest moments of the decline, though, is I have seen pride and arrogance ruin more people in this business than any scandal ever will. And when a leader thinks that he or she is all that in a bag of chips, that's when the consultations stop. And that is, at that very moment, is when the bad decisions start.
Yeah, when they start looking for, well, they're finding hills to die on rather than perhaps examining ways of compromise to hold things together. I just see a perilous, or not perilous, but a challenging outlook for the UCP going ahead. I mean, as we are in a two-party system, sort of, you're kind of all or nothing. The PC's had that vent. There was the Alberta Alliance, Wild Rose coming along, but there was also still some degree of the Liberal Party was going on. There was the NDP. Now you've really just got two, and holding that together. I mean, Nenchi's got his challenges as well, trying to keep things capped up with the NDP. But Premier Smith, now she's got kind of a newer element too. I said there's some core conservative principles, but not every conservative, for example, is supportive of Alberta independence. But that's a strong portion of her party base does support that. And she's got quite a balancing act to juggle there, too, because that's the sort of issue that could be a deal breaker for some people.
Well, I got to really commend the Premier here, because she and I have been on some opposite sides before. I've known her since 1998. It comes a time to let some of these things go. But again, what you want to ask really the direction the government is going. If the government is going, she's done very good job at standing up for this province. I think that's one thing where she has shone at. But that's that of itself, like, we want to ask ourselves, what do we want to do? We want more balanced budgets. She's delivered on a tax cut. That's great. I'm not saying that I support everything that the UCP is doing. There's some really bad insurance legislation that's coming out that's going to take everybody's rights away. But, I'm a supporter of this government. And the reason that we were able to win PC seats like in Edmonton is because there were two left-wing parties. There was the NDP and the Liberals. That now is only the NDP, and that's why we keep losing in Edmonton. It's a vote split, simple as that. But the flip side to that is if we have multiple conservative parties again, that poses a problem for us, even in Alberta, as we saw in 2015.
Yeah, well, that could be a real problem going on. It's funny when you're talking though about, and I mean, you're a lawyer. You've been actually, outspoken on with that. That's a whole separate issue. Maybe we'd talk about with some of the law societies and challenges going on there, and independence in those areas. But with data mining, I mean, it's understandable. Okay, the exercise, for example, that Mr. Lukaszyk's got going on. Those signatures, though, any signatures going towards a referendum, that data should not be used for any other purpose aside from giving to the electoral officer to invoke an election, right? Or a referendum.
So that's a bit of a complex issue. Just like every legal issue, the answer is it depends. Okay. So our privacy legislation, there's the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act, and then there's the Personal Information Protection Act. There's an exception there for politics. Okay, so for example, if I knock on your door and your issue are people using your washroom at your former restaurant, I will write that down. I can give that to a different candidate. It's a little bit different though when something like this is that it should not be used for other purposes. And I happen to know that the Chief Electoral Officer will salt lists. For example, we'll put a John Q. Simpson in that doesn't exist, and then if that John Q. Simpson is called from somebody else, that discloses that that's been used. So it's not against the privacy legislation, but for something like this, as you point out, it is actually against the Elections Act.
Yeah, actually, that salting lists, we did that with one of the Wild Rose leadership contests going on as well, just to make sure that people weren't sharing lists elsewhere, and we let them know because there's no sense being a secret.
Don't be surprised if that list actually was shared. Okay.
Yeah, but. Either way, it's we want to be preventative with it. But yeah, it's a good thing I don't own that bar anymore. I don't want people voting on whether or not they could use my bathroom. But I mean, it is complicated. If you're petitioning door to door, you can technically have two clipboards. One is for the potential signature, another is for, so, well, I've also met this person and they're supportive of this party, and I'm going to share the other clipboard information with the party of my choice.
Nothing stops that. Nothing stops that. So the question is where is this data going? I suspect that it is for more purposes than simply this Forever Canada campaign. What that is, I don't know.
Yeah, well, and we have to wonder, I mean, is Mr. Lukasik, it's a lot of work on his part, and he's not a fool. He knows this won't go anywhere, even if he gets it across the finish line and there's a referendum held. His question is saying, do you want to support the status quo? So, I mean, no matter which way a vote goes, nothing's going to change. So what is he really going for with this? Just trying to throw sand in the gears, or is there an ulterior motive? I mean, we can only speculate. We can only speculate at this point, but my prediction is that neither referendum question gets the requisite amount of signatures. It's a very high bar, and you only have a limited time to go through and get those particular signatures in. So that's a very, very high bar to go and meet. That's a lot of organization. Yes, there's 5 million people in this province. Some of them are under 18. Some of them are not Canadian citizens who are coming. That's great that they're coming here. But you're going from a very large group that you need to go and attract in a very short period of time. Yeah. So now the electoral officer has, put forward the Alberta Prosperity Project's question to the Court of King's bench to have them review it for constitutionality. Premier Smith has expressed ire with that, but I mean, the Premier doesn't want to get into a scrap with the Chief Electoral Officer. That's got some of the worst optics you could possibly have. But at the same time, does this need to go before that? I mean, I thought the Supreme Court and the Clarity Act pretty much laid it out. As long as you have a clear question, it shouldn't be a problem. So the Clarity Act says it must be a clear question and a clear majority. So the clear question, if you go back to the 1995 Quebec referendum, that was a very, very long question that Lucien Bouchard had put up. I actually think the better question that would be there is, do you want to separate from Canada, or something very similar to that? So a clear majority would mean something more than 50%, probably not 80%, but something more than 50%. So that's the Clarity Act. I want to just preface this comment that I'm not criticizing any judge. I'm not criticizing any court here whatsoever, but I do question, why does this need to go to a court? To me, that this is a political exercise. This is something that can be decided by our elected officials. I don't know why it's going to a court. Well, and it does. And, I've dealt with elections in Alberta. I've always actually, despite a lot of people having conspiracy theories and everything, I find they bend over backwards very hard to remain as unbiased as possible when it comes to partisan things. I mean, that's the very core of their being. They cannot apply a bias, or it's the worst possible area for such in a bureaucracy. It's the elections. But when he's taken it upon himself to put that towards the Court of King's bench, it kind of raises a little questions on, does he feel that it's worth, I don't want to question the integrity of the Chief Electoral Officer, but no, actually, for the most part, I've acted on a few judicial recounts at different levels of government. For the most part, our democracy in Canada is pretty good. It's never going to be perfect, but it's pretty good. You don't really have like these mass voter fraud issues and stuff like that you see in other democracies. It's pretty good. So the Chief Electoral Officer, they've always been pretty good as well. Like, I don't really think that there's a conspiracy going on there, but it does also raise a bit of an access to justice point. Okay. Lawyers aren't cheap. Okay. When you've actually got to go to court to get a referendum question established, it can be costly, and not everybody can afford that. No, and it can take some time. I mean, how long do you think it'll take before a judge could look at that and then give a ruling whether it's a thumbs up or thumbs down? Well, there's always a bit of mystery when it comes to the judges, and they often talk about the lack of judicial resources, which is real. Alberta, by every metric, to our ratio of judges to population has always been at the lower margin, and that's largely because of the people from Saskatchewan like me who keep coming here, the people from other provinces, other countries are coming here, but we have to keep up. It can take a very, very long time to get an answer to that question. And there's an old adage in my business, the wheels of justice turn slowly. That's entirely true. And the judge can issue it at any time. So the other question I would ask is this a political move to delay this closer to the next election in 2027? That's a valid question. Yeah, and I don't feel that the Premier is going to want to have to juggle that issue with a referendum happening close to a general election. Bingo. That's my point. So she would probably be, if she wants to get this done, she wants that Band-Aid peeled off next year so that whatever way that referendum goes, she's dealing now with an election the year after, not that.
No,
but she can't speed a judge up.
You can't speed basic judicial independence. I remember back in the day, Jean Charest got kicked out of cabinet in the '80s, minority cabinet in the '80s for even calling a judge. You don't go anywhere near that. They have independence as to when they want to send it out, and it's independent of any political direction. Once a judge is appointed, he or she can do whatever they want.
Yeah, and that independence is very important.
It is.
It's just, I'll leave with one final thing, though. Would it be possible then, even if there hadn't been a ruling, for the premier just to say, well, we're pulling the trigger, we can allow these guys to start petitioning now regardless, and we'll find out the constitutionality of it later?
That could be a little dangerous, because what could happen is a party could apply for an injunction stopping that. But on top of that, there's such a matter of a judicial independence order. The Chief Justice of Alberta can then go and issue a judicial independence order. I'm reminded once a conversation I had with Mr. Nenshi in 2012 when he wanted me to put the arrest processing unit at the bottom of the Calgary courthouse. I said, buddy, I will get a judicial independence order slapped against me if I go and do that. You're quite correct, Cory. That actually is a very important principle in our democracy.
All right. Well, I appreciate you coming in to, share some of your political and legal wisdom with us here in these crazy, unique times. Where can people find what you're up to? You're not as public as you used to be. I know you've got Guardian Law on the go, and you've been taking on some great cases. And
we have offices in both Calgary and Regina. Interprovincial office. Just bringing a couple more people on. Anybody has any questions for me? I just like to talk about this business. Give me a call and ask me for coffee, and you and I are overdue for that.
Great. Well, thank you very much again, and I'll let you get back going. I know you're on the road today, so I appreciate it and hope we talk again soon.
Thanks again for having me on, Cory. Take care.
Great. Thanks. So that was Jonathan Dennis. Some folks might remember past political figures in Alberta, and he's still out there and active with things. And there's just so many questions with this, right? You hope for clarity, you hope for clear-cut, straight paths, and then the ambiguity gets thrown in. I'm kind of frustrated in my view, but again, I'm not a judge, I'm not a lawyer. The question from the Alberta Prosperity Project is pretty straightforward. You can tell what they tried to do was very purposeful in saying, do you want, and I'm paraphrasing, I might have it a little off, I should have written it down, but do you want Alberta to become a sovereign nation of its own outside of Canada? You want to leave Canada? Just as clear as that. Jonathan said it should be just as basic as, do you want to separate, even a little more cut down from that. But separate, I guess the worry you get people, well, ambiguity, does that mean with this or that, or is that a sovereign nation of Alberta, or is that in conjunction with others? They made it pretty clear in a sentence in some of the Prosperity Project. As Jonathan mentioned, the Quebec referendum, for those who remember, from 1995, that question was a giant word salad of ambiguity and ugliness. And that's why it went, because you could read that 10 different ways. And how are you going to get people to vote on something? It should be pretty much stay or go. And I'm confident, though the judge might not agree with me, I'm confident that what the Alberta Prosperity Project put forward is clear. So why are we delaying on this? And then meanwhile, we got Luke Hasek. I've seen some of the discussion on the comment scroll. So, just to for some people who don't watch it as closely. So Alberta's referendum legislation just came into being, or just at least got amended recently. Jason Kenney first brought it in, and he set it to a ridiculous bar that made it pretty much impossible for anybody to meet it. That's why the recall legislation's in there as well. That's why to recall Jody Gondek under that old legislation took more signatures on a petition than people who actually voted in the election. It was ridiculous. And it's been scaled down. But Luke Hasek thought he'd jumped the gun, and he applied to petition to have a referendum held before the new legislation came into power. And it starts getting complicated. There's policy referendums, and there are referenda, and there's constitutional ones. Now, his would be under a policy one under the old legislation. It means he needs nearly 300,000 signatures, and he only has 90 days to get them. I'm hearing different numbers from them. They already flubbed up and stepped in it by attacking Alberta's flag at a Safeway and embarrassed themselves and shut down one of their Facebook groups that gets them going. They have not been doing well, though they've been getting a lot of legacy media coverage. Chorus just seems to be determined to pump the tires for Luke Hasek's petition. to get 300,000 signatures, you got to remember this is a real petition. This isn't online. This isn't anything like that. You've got to have a person registered holding that clipboard to another person, witnessing them to fill out their full name, home address. You can't use a mailing address. Just for people with the APP, I'll give that tip. Don't take a box number. That's invalid. It's got to have contact information in it. And it's got to be legible. And to get 300,000 of those is massive. It is massive. They need 3,300 of those a day for 90 days pretty much to pull it down. And you got to remember, you got to be closer to over 300,000 because you know they're going to throw some out. Or as Jonathan said, the chief electoral officer will actually have some fake names in there to make sure you're not abusing the lists. And what they'll do is they won't check every name, of course. That would take them years to check the 300,000 people. But they'll task a bunch of staff to check a whole bunch of the names. They'll watch for duplicates. Duplicates are going to be thrown out. If you're doing it, you see, part of what Fabio there, Lukasic, is doing is he's going to farmers markets and public events and they're getting signatures there. That's fine in the short term. But what you find at those is it's the same people who come weekend after weekend after weekend. They can only sign once. And if they sign multiple times, you're going to get in trouble because they do cross-check some of this. And they're going to check some others. And if this is a fake person, that's going to get stricken off the list. And if they find too many invalid ones in the petition, they could throw the entire thing out. So it is no small task to get these 300,000 signatures. Now, the Alberta Prosperity Project, theirs was filed after the new legislation came in. So they only need, and it's still a lot, 170 some thousand signatures. And they'll have 120 days to do it rather than 90 days. So a much, much lower bar than what Thomas Lukasic has. And they've been organizing for years. They've been gathering names for years. They've been holding meetings around the province for years. This is the game. This is what they've been waiting for. This is what they're up for. So I'm pretty confident if they can just get the go-ahead, they're going to get it done. But if now the electoral officer is throwing this into the courts, how long is it going to be before they're allowed to actually start collecting these signatures? This is a more sand in the gears than Lukasic possibly could have done. So are there going to be two referendum? I doubt it. I really don't believe Lukasic's going to get those 300,000 in. But as Jonathan pointed out, this could have a different agenda, right? You're also data mining while you're at it. You're campaigning while you're at it. You're doing a whole separate thing while you're at it. So even if you never get the question on, suddenly, you see, data is everything. Those lists, those identified people, it is worth a lot to somebody running a campaign. And Lukasic and his volunteers are building up a whole lot of names of people. Not saying that they're photocopying the petition forms. That would be an abuse of it. But as I was saying with Jonathan, if you're there with two clipboards and you write down one, write down the other, I tell you what, I'll give this tip to people with the Alberta Prosperity Project. Once they get on the real petition, once they get on with this, volunteers should carefully do this. You're going door to door, and that's what it's going to take is people going door to door in the end of it. That's a lot of work. But you're going door to door and you find somebody who is, yes, I am gung-ho, I want independence. Not only that, I'll sign your petition, but I want to see a sign on my lawn when the campaign for the referendum actually begins, and I want to donate to the referendum campaign. Well, you got to have a separate clipboard and write that stuff down, and you should. Don't lose out on those ones. Also, if you get somebody who comes to their doorstep and says, I'm going to kick you in the privates if I ever see one of you guys on our doorstep again or anything like that, you should probably note that in the other clipboard too, so you don't waste time going out there. Because you see, there's two campaigns. Right now, we're just in the petitioning campaign part. Just the part of trying to get the question on a referendum ballot. Then a date has to be set for the referendum. As Jonathan said, politically, I think Premier Smith will want this sooner rather than later because she doesn't want to be dealing with whatever way this goes when a general election comes. We're looking at, 2 years now? She won't want that to be hanging over onto that. And then a referendum campaign means you have to convince a clear majority of Albertans. And there's another one of those areas of big ambiguity, and this is going to be one of the huge ones. A clear majority of Albertans saying they want to go. And I've been fighting with a few independent-minded people about that already. There's not a clear majority yet, not even close. We're talking about numbers 300,000, 30%, 40% at the highest. Realistically, if we don't want it in the courts forever, it's got to be at least 55% voting on that. And that's a big campaign. That's a big swing in public opinion. But as I said in my opening monologue, Alberta's in a perilous position. We've got a surpluses going. We got a different attitude here. We're doing well, and we got a country that's swirling the toilet. So I got a feeling there could be a big cash grab. That number can turn from that 30 or 40% for independents and get a lot bigger really fast if the feds make a move on us. Question from one of the commenters saying, could I do a segment on how to obtain a Commissioner of Oath certification? I do think we'll need many. Yeah, because as pointed out with that, when you're petitioning, every person who does that, then they got to bring their petition and swear an affidavit to a Commissioner of Oaths that they witnessed the signatures on it. Like, this is not a minor affair, folks. And the more people who are Commissioners of Oaths, the better. I don't know the process. My wife, Jane, I don't even know if she still has that status any longer, but she was a Commissioner of Oaths. She did that for a while when she ran a business center. And I'm pretty sure the process is online. I don't know everything that goes into it necessarily. But I mean, some of the discussions of what's going to be needed. Darkrope saying APB needs more canvassers than Commissioners of Oaths. Yeah, well, you need both. That's the bottom line. It'll save you some grief. If you got a bunch of people working the doors, you don't want to slow things down if there's only 2 people who can witness that, who only have certain periods of time to witness those signatures and sign off. If there's 10 of them, that'll make it easier. But the realism is you need thousands. You do. You need thousands of volunteers getting out there and getting those signatures. And central organization. They got to be bringing all of those petition forms into one area. You got to make sure that somebody hasn't, you got to think of the sabotage that people are going to do. Somebody could put a whole fake bunch of petitions things in just to screw with what's being brought in. They got to watch for that. This is a big game, guys. And it's going to be an interesting one. Nothing else. Another thing on that, it's going before, I guess, the first hearing before a judge, which I think is optimistic. With that question, I believe it's tomorrow. It's going before the judge, at least. The only problem is the judge might sit on it for 4 months before making a ruling. But Alan Adam, he's a former First Nations chief. He was from Athabasca area. He's got a couple of claims to fame, but he's been having temper tantrums over it. Oh, he's been jumping up and down and saying he's not going to let us. He's saying we don't have the right to vote on Alberta. He's full of crap. Alan Adam, as you hear that in the news reports, you got to remember, he's a rent-a-chief. He's a rent-a-chief. He got busted already. He got $55,000 from the Tides Foundation to oppose oil sands development. So if I see him suddenly jumping up and down so hard in opposition to the independence referendum, kind of makes you wonder who's paying his bills. His other claim to fame, you can see, is him getting roughly busted and impaired in a whole number of things outside of a casino up north. That video went a little viral some years ago too. Anyways, Mr. Adam is not exactly a credible individual, but Legacy Media, of course, is reporting on it. Look at this, a chief, and I think he's even a former chief, not even a current one. I could be wrong. He might be back in. I don't know. But is opposing this. Thus, it can't happen. I've covered that in past videos. I covered that on this show. And the Supreme Court has covered it many, many times when it comes to things like things happening on Crown land, projects, consultation. Despite what some people are trying to spread out there, First Nations, Indigenous people, whatever the term of the week is for them, do not have a veto power over developments. They don't have a veto power over referendums. They don't have a veto power over much of anything outside of their own bloody reserve. And the Supreme Court has ruled on that many times. We have an obligation to consult. And people are blurring that line between consult and consent. Big difference between the two. Some First Nation advocates and lefties and other jerks are saying we need consent. No, you do not. But we do need to consult. What better way to consult than holding a referendum? That's exactly what a referendum is. It's consulting. It's consulting everybody. And the Indigenous people will have just as many votes as everybody else. 1 per person. They don't want to give consent, they vote no. They lose the majority. Life sucks. Move on. You still have your reserve. Your treaties are still intact, but the federation is done, and the new government around you is now an independent province, or at least working towards it. This has been covered a lot, but legacy media won't cover it. It won't break that down. It won't give you those details. It'll act as if guys like Renta Chief Adam is an authority, and he's not. He's not an authority on much of anything, I assure you. All right. That kind of covers it today, guys. Thank you very much for tuning in. Watch for the pipeline coming on tonight. We're going to have a panel with Nigel and Erica Barudis and some others. And, I held that cough almost to the end. Be sure to tune in again next week, guys, and I'll have a whole new bunch of subjects and another guest to talk about. So thanks again. See you then.